Assalamu alaikum, everybody. It's an honor to be with you. My name is Dr. Azzuddin Hawam, the founder of Sadaa Echoes. Today, we are very excited and privileged to be with our friend and colleague, Dr. Patlee Creary. Today's session is under the Unbounded Stories series, which brings together voices, practices, and lived experiences that move us across borders and distances. Through these conversations, we aim at bringing communities together, building bridges, and using artistic abilities and expressions to highlight the importance of stories and narratives. In today's conversation, we're exploring the ways stories and mindfulness, how do you say this? Mindfulness, how do you say this?
Mindfulness.
Mindfulness, we can fix it. Works in our spaces, and together we are trying to create spaces for reflection, healing, and collective care, inviting us to slow down, listen deeply, and reconnect with ourselves and one another. Through lived experiences and practice, we consider how storytelling can become a mindful act that nurtures belonging, resilience, and shared humanity. Today's guest is Dr. Patlee Creary, is the founder of Reyou Mindfulness Collective and the executive director and co-founder of the StoryBridge Network. We're very honored to be with you.
Thank you
Thank you
so
for
much.
accepting our invitation. I'll let you introduce yourself more. It's truly a privilege to be sitting next to you.
Oh, thank you, Esteem. The pleasure is mine, and thank you for having me. Um, uh, well, I don't know. How much do you need to hear
You
or
tell
know
us
about
anything you
myself?
want. We just want to know you more.
So I'm Jamaican by birth and Canadian at heart, I guess, in a way. And I'm a mother, and I consider myself more of a mindful storyteller as part of my own mindfulness practice. Like I love writing, and I love listening with other people about their stories and engaging in self-reflective work and practices, but a lot of it is grounded in the work that, like yourself, I've studied through Peace and Conflict Studies program at the Mora
Mhm.
Center or the Mora Institute at the U of M. And yeah, I don't know, I kind of feel like this is a good place to be at this point that the world is in the shape that it's in, like to be able to look inward and listen to ourselves and listen to stories, and also to encourage persons to sit with us and do the same thing.
Thank you very much, and it's an honor again to be with you. We have a few questions to guide our conversations, but first, could you tell us a little bit about mindfulness? What is that? If you've
Mm-hmm.
never heard of it,
Ah,
what
yeah,
would you define that to be?
yeah. So mindfulness is by definition, so to work with the simplest definition and the definition that I hold really dearly, is simply paying attention on purpose,
Mm,
purposely paying attention. So it's intentional awareness, intentional attention to what is going on in yourself, with yourself, and around yourself. So it's attention to what's going on in you, with you, and around you. So it brings in this multi-dimensional orientation to the way that we see and move through the world. You know, I can bring that attention to what's happening in my mind with my thoughts. I can bring that attention to what's happening with my emotions and the way that I'm feeling today.
mm,
I can bring that attention to the way that my body is registering. How am I hungry? Am I not hungry? Am I full? And I can bring that attention to the way that I move through the world, the way that I engage with physical things, the way that I engage with other individuals, other people. And so, I like to sort of continuously engage with that definition of mindfulness, the attention that arises when we purposely pay attention to
mm,
something. Another component of mindfulness that I like to bring in is non-judgment. So the non-judgment piece is really not, it's not that we never have judgment. Everybody has judgment, right? It's really being aware of the fact that we all have that tendency towards judgment, and to accept that that is part of us, and to acknowledge that that plays a role in the way that we show up, the way that we interact with people, the way that we interact with ourselves,
Mm.
and our environment, and just be mindful of that, right? Pay attention to that component as well.
Yeah, I hear the notion of listening and listening deeply to
Yeah,
one own self first and to everything around you.
yeah,
And I think in the world we live in today, I think that is a skill often maybe not used, especially in a busy world. Here in the city, I run from one place to another, from one event to another, from one thing to another, and sometimes I need to take that time to listen deeply to what my body is telling me, to what I'm feeling, and so on. So, in your work, then, Dr. Batley, how do you see mindfulness helping people adapt to change?
yeah. Well, I use it across three dimensions. I use mindfulness in um, trying to, I guess, acknowledge the way that we adapt to changes in our environment that create stressors. So that's the first component. And I kind of put that into the pillar of what I call wellness,
Hmm.
right? So um, specifically, I tend to engage with, I've learned and I practice a form of mindfulness based stress reduction practice. It's called MBSR. So it's a clinical approach to the way that we use mindfulness to support our mental well-being, um, in the sense of paying attention to what's going on in our bodies,
Mm.
right? So this is where we talk about um, needing to slow down and to pay attention to our breath and to find ourselves in our body and to physically, take a moment to observe what is going on around us, like literally stop and observe, what can I see, what can I touch, what can I hear, like all of those things, to bring those senses back into the body and to remind ourselves that we're here.
Hmm.
And it's a good skill to build, especially when we are in a world where we have to be constantly moving from one thing to the next thing to the next thing. And what I've learned and what I try to practice with mindfulness based stress reduction techniques is that you can find those moments in
Mm.
between the rush and the movement. And it really is about, catching yourself when you notice that you've kind of gone off the rails and you're no longer paying attention. So that's one area where I tend to use it. And I think it helps us with managing change because there's, like if you even listen to the news right now, like, we don't even have to go as far as a conflict, like a
Yeah.
major conflict between two state parties to just feel the pressure of the world. Just look at what's happening with news in our city, what's happening across the country and just across our border. Like, it feels really, really heavy. And that emotional weight is something that we can't outrun.
Hmm.
We can't avoid it. We can't turn our heads away from it. We can't turn off the radio or the TV and it stops. And so that ability to bring ourselves back into our bodies, to know that, okay, this is me, this is where I am. And then from there, what can I do,
Hmm.
with myself and in myself to make things a little bit better for the person that is closest to me. And then we start working our
Hmm.
way out, right? So that's the wellness component, but it also transitions into what I call the narrative component. Because if we're listening, and this is a thing, when we're parents, caregivers, leaders, business owners, we're constantly we're constantly managing change, right? We're leading change, we're forcing change, we're adapting to change. And the stories that we tell ourselves about what is happening in those change moments is so critical. And I feel like mindfulness, again, that attention that arises when we pay attention, when we start paying attention to those stories that are popping up in our heads, that we're hearing from other people, even the stories about the way that we listen to
Hmm.
other people, right? Those things are particularly important. And the stories that we have around how we're accepting this change, or what this change really means, or is this even change?
Hmm.
Is this just things just carrying on as they have always been? Like all of that kind of just speaks, just rolls into that narrative framework. And then the third component is what I refer to as the strategic element. That's our strategic pillar. And the strategic element has everything to do with change, but working through from that mindfulness um, uh, imperative is how do we put ourselves in a position to do something about it? How do
Mm.
we put ourselves in a position to act meaningfully in a values based way that actually um, creates some kind of change or a catalyst or something that can help us and the people around us be better able to deal with the situation. So, again, facilitating that change, but how do we facilitate that change within the resources that we have? The complexities that we live with and the ways that we all need to move ourselves forward.
So beautiful. You brought me back to my the small village that I just got back from in Palestine. There is always time for tea,
Mm,
despite everything around you. You wake up and there is your aunt and your cousins and your uncles sitting in front of a wood fire or a wood stove making bread.
hmm.
And you walk in and it's like an invitation to slow down.
Yes.
Like, they say this thing in Palestine where the world is not going to run away.
Yeah.
This notion of like, sit.
Yes.
I remember going to an office, a government office, to apply for something, and I'm with all my papers trying to get things done, and the man goes, "Have a seat. There is lemon being made, like they
Hmm.
squeezed fresh lemon." And so I happened to be walked in when the lemon was being squeezed in the back. So he
Okay.
comes out with a glass of lemon. He goes, drink some lemon."
Yeah.
And this notion of like, slowing down. So I appreciate those notions of reminding us that sometimes we don't take the time to do that.
Yeah.
I want to learn more about the StoryBridge Network,
Hmm.
and because stories connect us here and they heal us. How do you use that space to ensure people feel seen, valued, heard, um, and what is it?
Yeah. So the StoryBridge is a nonprofit organization that I co-founded actually, with my husband last year. This March, March 1st would actually be our first year in existence. So we're really excited about
Congratulations.
that. And we've got a wonderful board of directors that's like supporting us every step of the way. StoryBridge started as it began for me as a coping mechanism.
Mm.
It was something that I needed at a time when, again, change and things just moving way too fast, and I couldn't make sense of it. And I thought, you know what? We talk about transferable skills, right? There are so many things that I learned in the Peace and Conflict Studies program at the Moore Institute, which at the time when I was learning them, I wasn't sure what I was meant to do with it. But one of the key things that I learned about was the value of storytelling in conflict transformation. Mind you, not conflict management or
Yeah, yeah.
resolution, but transformation,
Yes, yes.
change in the relationships that we have. And I recall as I was going through and doing my PhD thesis, I had done this investigation around Canadian and Jamaican soldiers' lived experiences of their peace building roles when they were
Mm.
in deployment. And I used a qualitative method to do that investigation called phenomenology, which is
Mm.
the study of lived experiences. And so, with going through and putting that together and sort of taking that storied look at things, with that qualitative data, you could see the emergence of these anecdotes, these little stories that amplify these pockets of peace. And I also noticed where the stories were difficult, where it was difficult for someone to be able to talk about what it was that they were talking about, either because of various uh, uh, manifestations of trauma, or just an inability to sort of vision or narrate or explicate things as they had experienced them. So fast forward a few years later, and this is now 2018, a couple of years before COVID. And myself, I had kind of gone through my own like major transition thing. I was like, you know what, I'm not sure if the academic trying to the picture that I saw for myself in terms of where I would be working with this PhD and stuff like that, if that's really where I wanted to go. And my coping mechanism by default is to write.
Mm.
It's to fall back into myself, to engage with those mindfulness based stress reduction practices that I talk about, and find myself in quiet and solitude. And I started writing. And one of the things that occurred to me, I started writing these stories. And one of the things that occurred to me is that we're all kind of, we talk about conflict transformation as changing that relationship. But the first conflict that we need to transform is the conflict within ourselves, right? And I remember hearing something when I was in the Peace and Conflict Studies program. Like somebody had said this quote, I don't quite recall, but it's hard to hate someone when you know their story. And I thought to myself, well, what if people knew their own stories? Like,
Mm.
how many people are walking around with this burden and this hatred because they have not acknowledged or taken the time to learn and attend to their own stories? So I started writing these little stories for myself about myself. And then when I got a little braver, I would share the stories with other people. And there would be like, yeah, that happened to me too.
Yeah.
And then I got a little braver and I started asking other people, so what's your untold story? Like I would always say that to them, the untold story. What is your untold story? And, usually our told story is something around, our achievements or what our kids are doing, or we just did this, or we just got back from this trip. And we carry the untold story of, I'm grieving this loss that no, I can't say to anybody because it happened like 10 years ago,
Yeah.
and people might still be wondering, well, why are you still thinking about that, right? Or I'm not feeling so well today, or I had real difficulty getting out of bed this morning. Those are some of the untold stories. Or I'm really excited because this tiny, tiny thing happened and it just brought this amount of joy into my day. So I started listening to people and hearing, and they would share those stories with me, and I'd say, "Oh, that's so cool! Can I write about it?" So I wrote about that, and then I'd share those stories with other people, and other people would go, "Huh!" And it was just this nice sort of, snowballing effect of seeing people light up and brighten up when one, you ask them, "So, what's your story? Like, what's going on with you today?" They're seeing, right?
Mm.
And you give them the space to express themselves however they feel like expressing themselves, without filter, without any kind of censorship. They're heard, right? And then when you tell them that, what, I see something of myself in your own story. It brings me value. It teaches me something. It makes me feel like I have a connection with you, even though we've only just met, or I only knew you in this capacity before. I feel like I have a deeper connection that makes me, want to just hug myself right now. And you say that to them, and then they feel valued,
Mm.
right? And I've always kind of held on to that. And I was curious, I was craving, like, how do we bring more of this into the world? And it took me a while to figure it out. And for a while, it kind of got put on hold. And I'm like, yeah, about 2, 3 years ago, I kind of got the opportunity to learn how to build a not-for-profit organization. And I'm like, well, there it is.
This is a
This is the
chance.
moment to put it together.
Yes.
And we've had just phenomenal feedback and experiences, because all the projects that we've done so far are about creating opportunities for people who are typically underrepresented, who are typically marginalized, who are typically silenced by the systems, the noise, the change